As we've been hearing today in the summit, the cloud's massive computing power, combined with predictive capabilities, can deliver valuable solutions to some of state and local government's biggest challenges. Reducing fraud, waste, and abuse is one key area where the cloud is having the most transformative impact. Here with insights on how to maximize that impact while minimizing costs are founder and CEO of Pondera, Jon Coss, and Microsoft Solutions Specialist for Health and Human Services, Jeff King. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to start with the poll that you provided, and you asked, which government subsidy program do you think has the highest dollar volume of identified fraud? Is it unemployment insurance, Medicaid, food stamps, or childcare? This is actually not a poll. This is a quiz. So take your guess at which of those has the highest dollar volume of identified fraud, and we will give you the answer in a few minutes. So, Jon, I think everybody watching this has heard stories about fraud, waste, and abuse. But just how big a problem is it? Give us sort of the 900-foot view.
Sure. It's a big problem. Most people don't realize that there's over 2,000 federal subsidy programs in the country.
2,000?
2,000.
Wow.
And every year, those subsidy programs distribute about $2 trillion worth of benefits. And if you take sort of a rule of thumb that about 10% of that is improperly paid, fraud, waste, and abuse, that's over $200 billion a year that's improperly paid out through these programs. So it's
why 10%? How do you know that?
Well, it varies, and the government reports on themselves. So there is federal law that makes them report their own fraud numbers, and typically they come in around 10%.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's about $200 billion a year, which is the equivalent of, say, what was spent on, the Obama administration and the stimulus package.
Wow. Now, some people might just say, well, what? They should just be policing themselves better. 10% is kind of a big, number.
They do, yeah. And they certainly try to police themselves. And every government agency that distributes subsidies has programs in place to fight fraud, waste, and abuse. But there's a lot of factors that make it very, very difficult. And, one of the other things that I should certainly mention is it's not just a fiscal problem. The money that is taken out of these programs often takes advantage of people that are more vulnerable. So elderly, younger people, things like that. And, unfortunately, our business sort of thrives where large amounts of money and vulnerable populations come together. That's really where fraud occurs.
So tell us about the Pondera system and how does it work?
Yeah, so it starts when a government contracts with us and they provide us with these files of their historical data so we can tune our system for them. So in the case of, say, a Medicaid system, we'll be provided with their pharmacies, their providers, their doctors, their hospital data, all of their beneficiary data, and then the actual claims and the procedures that are performed. We take that data and we run it through a set of algorithms, prediction models, things like that. We also combine it with third-party data. So we're looking for things like stolen identity, fictitious businesses, unusual clusters, patterns, trends in the data. And then when the system determines that something unusual has occurred and it's suspicious or indicative of fraud, it sends an alert to our client, and then our client can then go follow up on it.
I see. So, Jeff, you were part of the Microsoft Solutions team that came up with this. Can you tell us more about the technology behind it?
Absolutely. And so, when you say came up with this, this is definitely a solution that was born through our partner, Pondera. Where we sit as an organization is really providing them the tools that they need to be successful in driving their technology that they've developed. And if you think about the amount of data, so Jon just talked about all these different data streams that are coming into the Pondera solution, we have to ingest that data. We have to store it securely. This data, a lot of it, the Medicaid claims data especially, is bound by, regulatory compliance controls mandated by the federal government and state government. So we've got to store that in a very secure location that complies with those standards. And that's really where Microsoft comes in and provides a set of cloud services in our Microsoft Azure Government Cloud that allow us to do that. And that's sort of the first layer of what I would call our partnership. The second layer is we at Microsoft are developing our own proprietary cloud services that specialize around AI and ML services. And what we've been able to do is work with Jon's team to help provide access to those tools and bring our teams together so we can learn from one another.
can you give us some specific examples of the type of fraud that has been uncovered?
Sure. Unfortunately, because of the business we're in, we can't talk about a lot of them, but there's certainly some cases that we can.
Share some things with our
Well, we don't want to
audience.
actually help the bad guys learn from what we're looking for. But I can give you some examples, certainly. One interesting one was in the Midwest. It was in an unemployment insurance system. And a very sophisticated group of fraudsters actually set up some fake businesses that appeared to be real. And then they stole some identities. And these fake businesses then hired these fake employees. So it was very interesting because when something would go wrong, the business wouldn't report on the employees wouldn't report on the business because neither one of them actually existed. So this fake business eventually, unfortunately, ran into some financial difficulties. So they laid off these fake employees who then filed
Collected
for unemployment
unemployment.
insurance. What was really interesting, too, was that they'd actually been working with a real estate agent who provided them with addresses where they could send correspondence, cards, checks, things like that, where houses were for sale, weren't going to sell, foreclosed, and things like that. So very sophisticated sort of 360-degree fraud ring.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then how did, Pondera discover this?
Our system sort of lit up like a Christmas tree on this one because, we look for fictitious businesses, we look for false identities, we look for unusual clusters and patterns. So we were able to shut this one down pretty quickly.
Really? So it's not just one thing, you're saying. I mean, there's usually multiple triggers that
That's right.
say, investigate this a little bit.
That's right. We actually, in a typical system, we have 400, 500, 600 different models that are looking for these patterns and activities and unusual transactions, and then we'll combine them. We actually combine all of that over time into a scorecard so that whatever government agency it is, if it's Medicaid, if it's unemployment, they can stack rank every single business or beneficiary in their system for the potential for fraud. And that's based on all of those behaviors and transactions over time.
Stack rank them in terms of probability,
That's
you mean?
correct. Yeah, this is the most likely fictitious business in your program to all the way down to the least likely. And this can even, this can be hundreds of thousands or even millions of individuals.
Wow. And of course, states are going to go, well, we don't have time to investigate them all, but this is why you're talking about a stack rank order. So if they only have the funds and time to go after the first 10 or the first 100 or the first 500.
That's exactly right. And, most states will say, we want the ones to come to the top. The first is anything that's, compromising safety for our citizens, because that's certainly, the case in some of these areas. And then obviously ones that have the biggest financial impact as well.
Scamsters are always going to try to stay one step ahead of that, right? And so is it sort of a cat and mouse thing where, you've set your triggers and then they figure out what those are and then they try to get around that?
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. So, we never talk about completely eliminating fraud. But what we talk about is staying. Yeah, I know. It would be nice. But we like to stay just, one step behind them. And we do a lot of things, both from a human feedback mechanism, but that's also where some of the Microsoft technology comes in, where we use machine learning, to constantly update our models so that as the system continues to identify emerging trends, patterns, clusters, we incorporate that into the system, and then we roll that out to all of our clients so that, we can pick up on these new fraud schemes.
And some of the work we're doing with our AI and ML teams right now, actually with Pondera, is to go out and help them reduce the number of false positives that are coming up as these scam artists or con artists, whatever we want to call them, are adjusting. As Jon stated, as soon as we figure out one way that they're defrauding the system, they come out with brand new ways of doing it again. And some of the things that we're looking at, and this is really where I think we're focusing on our partnership around AI and ML, and why we're so excited is, we're also able to learn from what Pondera is doing in looking at the trends and patterns and applying that to our own internal technology at Microsoft.
Yeah.
To help bring that to the forefront for our other customers as well.
That's interesting that you mentioned false positives. I mean, usually we hear that in the context of medical results, but you can have that for fraud as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And, it's very different in government than it is, say, in commercial. So you've probably been traveling before and you went to use your credit card and it was denied.
Right.
And you have to call into your credit card company and they say, well, did you make these transactions? And if you did, then they just allow you to continue using your card. If you didn't, then they send you a new one. That would be a false positive in the first case, right? We can't do that in government because if we deny you, say, an unemployment insurance
Oh my
claim,
gosh, yeah.
right, you may not be able to make your house payment or feed your children, or so it's very, very important that we keep false positives to an absolute minimum.
Yeah. You curious about the poll results?
I am.
I am. We had asked which government subsidy program has the highest dollar volume of identified fraud. What do most people think? They think Medicaid. 62% guess Medicaid. And that is the correct answer.
That's the correct answer. So I think the last figure I saw on that was about $36 billion worth of fraud annually. And that's just Medicaid.
Billion with a B.
Billion with a B. That's just Medicaid, not Medicare, not commercial health insurance. Health, because it's so complicated. If you've been to a doctor, you've seen, wow, there were 100 things done and I was in the office for 15 minutes. Unfortunately, that lends itself, that complexity, to some potential fraud.
That's so interesting, because when I read about this, I thought, well, it could be Medicaid. It could also be unemployment insurance was my, second guess, because that's also easy. But Medicaid, do you think it's just because there's so many people on it?
Yeah,
versus some of the other programs.
Right?
Yeah.
Very large program, very large dollars, very complex. We are working with one state that has 13 million beneficiaries in the program and hundreds of thousands of businesses providing services to them. So whenever you have that, there's an opportunity for fraud.
But the false positives can be high with Medicaid as well, because how will the program know that, no, this person is not disabled, for example?
Yeah, it can be. And one of the things that we certainly do is that's why we bring in those hundreds of models and then we look at things over time. So we time slice data, we have some very temporal elements to it so that we can see if someone is defrauding over time. Because certainly you don't want to go out and investigate and spend money on investigation, hassle a good provider or beneficiary based on one mistake. Could be somebody keyed something in wrong, right? Like a social security number incorrectly. That's not fraud, that's a mistake.
Right.
So our system tries to look at these things over time to bring the most egregious cases to the top.
Yeah. You talked, Jeff, about the whole cat and mouse thing, and sometimes they get ahead. Do you think that the problem sometimes gets worse, before it's addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's what we're working hard with the Pondera AI and ML teams with Microsoft is really understanding how we stay ahead of that. And, we've got bleeding edge tools that we're also looking to bring to market and test, and Pondera has a data set of actual, fraudulent transactions that we can analyze and help develop the technology behind that and then share that with them and vice versa. So that's really what it's all about. Yeah.
And recently you guys moved to the Azure platform. Why? And has that been helpful?
Yeah, I can tell you, we've always had a Microsoft stack from a technology perspective, but originally we decided to host our client systems in a private data center near our offices. Gave us a little bit more control, maybe a sense of security over it. Then what happened was, as we started to bring on more clients and larger clients, we started to have some scalability issues. As our models got more complex as well, and the algorithms that we were running, they would literally time out. We just couldn't get the computing power to do these more sophisticated models in a timely manner. So that was really what the impetus was behind our move to Azure. And then the fact that, we also have now availability of these cutting edge, machine learning and artificial intelligence tools in that platform. And, oh, by the way, we have FedRAMP compliance and it's secure. That allows me to sleep better at night while we're also performing for our clients.
Sure.
Yeah, and so, the Microsoft Azure Government Cloud, I think, is really the key piece to this as well. As John said, the compliance component is high. The people that we have employed in our data centers for Azure government workloads are background checked. We have physical isolation of all of our network infrastructure and our physical infrastructure in the buildings. We go through the rigorous audits that are required to pass these compliance standards that are dictated by the government, and it really helps remove the burden from our customer for some of that, and where they can bring their technology and safely deploy it. I think from our perspective too, just extending beyond even the technology side, I think, as an organization, Microsoft is really starting to change as we move to cloud. What we're realizing is that, we no longer go into a business and and sell some SQL Server licenses and disengage. It's really about going into an organization with a solution that works, and we have these world-class players like Pondera in the market who are building these solutions. We can provide the infrastructure needed to surface that solution securely, provide the compute capabilities, the GPUs that are needed to process these complex transactions with these, very, very complex algorithms, and give their fraud investigators, a much better platform to do their job. And so for us, it's more than just providing the technology. It's like how we actually go out to market with our partners now together to be able to solve some of these problems.
And then I guess I want to, leave with, if cities and states are watching this and they're wondering, I definitely want to control my fraud, waste, and abuse. I mean, what government doesn't? What sorts of things should they be thinking about and considering and taking into account? Of course, budgets are always, an issue for governments. Jon?
Yeah. There's certainly a lot of things. I mean, there's budgets. There's the ability, and I think you mentioned it before, when we turn the system on, we may overwhelm you with the potential fraud, waste, and abuse for you to go after.
Right.
So your ability to consume and do something about that.
The enforcement end.
Yeah, the enforcement end really plays a large part in it. There's always regulatory. There's priorities that you have that should be done ahead of time. There's change management within organizations, but we deploy very quickly. We understand the issues of government, so our engagements have certainly gone smoothly.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. You've given us a lot of food for thought. And yes, there may be an overwhelming set of data coming your way, but it's what people want to know, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.